I am Mary Peterson, 32 years old, and until recently I believed I had chosen the right man to build a future with. I teach high school history, something most people politely call noble but impractical, but I have never measured my life in dollar signs. My boyfriend of 4 years, Lucas Hale, saw the world differently. He believed ambition and financial strategy were the pillars of adulthood. Maybe that should have been my first warning, but love has a way of painting over cracks until the whole wall gives way at once. We met at a mutual friend's backyard barbecue. I remember the heat, the smell of grilled corn, the way Lucas stood near the drinks table talking animatedly about closing a deal for the pharmaceutical company he worked for. He had that confident charm some people carry naturally, the kind that makes others lean in, not because he asks them to, but because they feel pulled. When he noticed me watching, he walked over with certainty, not arrogance, and introduced himself. I was struck by how easy he made conversation feel, how he seemed to light up when I mentioned teaching. For a while, I genuinely believed he respected it. Over time, I realized he respected the idea of teaching the symbolism, the patience, the noble struggle, but not the paycheck that came with it. Still, for most of our relationship, we managed to live harmoniously. He made significantly more than I did, and we split things fairly. When we moved in together, I paid a little less for rent since it matched my income, and he insisted that this was reasonable. We both contribute what we can, he used to say. I clung to that line more than I should have, believing it revealed a fairness in him that would carry through our future. But 6 months before the wedding, that belief fractured. We were seated in a small Italian restaurant on a Wednesday evening, candles flickering low. Lucas had been unusually quiet all day, brushing off my attempts to ask what was wrong. I assumed something had gone poorly at work, or maybe he was exhausted from travel. When the waiter brought ravioli to the table, Lucas barely looked at his food. Finally, he exhaled long and heavy and said, "Mary, there's something we need to discuss. Something important." My stomach tightened, not from fear, but from that intuitive shift people feel before their life tilts in a new direction. He folded his hands. "I think we should talk about protecting our assets." I blinked. Protecting our assets. Right. I think we need a prenup. A real one drawn up professionally. My financial advisor said it is the smart thing to do. I have a career trajectory, future earning potential. I need to make sure everything I have worked for stays protected. His words landed with the cold delicacy, each one carefully chosen, rehearsed even. The implication was not hidden. I made a modest teacher's salary, $58,000 a year, and he worried I might someday cost him money. I kept my voice steady. "You want a prenup because you make more than I do." "I want a prenup because it is responsible," he corrected. "I cannot risk jeopardizing my financial security. I'm heading towards 6 figures. My advisor thinks I will get there soon." "You?" His voice wavered, then steadied. "Your job is admirable, Mary. It is just not lucrative. You understand, right?" I sat there for a moment, letting the words settle. My pasta cooled while I studied him. Not the man I loved, but the one sitting across from me now, shaped by fear, pride, and a need to protect something he believed he built alone. "What exactly are you protecting, Lucas?" I finally asked. "You have savings, yes. A car, retirement accounts. But what else?" He hesitated, as if he had expected pushback, but not the kind that touched his insecurities. "It is not just what I have now," he said. "It is what I am building. The smart thing is to create boundaries before issues arise." Boundaries. The word felt like a wall slamming down between us. Then he added, "If you do not want to sign it, we might need to rethink whether we are truly compatible long term." There it was, the ultimatum. I looked at him carefully, letting silence make him uncomfortable. When I finally spoke, I said only, "Okay." He blinked. "Okay, what?" "Okay, I will sign it." He looked stunned, almost unsettled. "Really? Just like that?" "It makes sense to protect what you have worked for," I replied calmly. Lucas's shoulders loosened. Relief washed over him so visibly, it nearly made me laugh. "I am glad you understand," he said, smiling. "Most people get weird about prenups." I ignored the flare of something sharp in my chest. "Let us get it drawn up then." The following week, his lawyer prepared the document. It was thorough, painfully so. Every clause benefited him. All premarital assets remained separate. All inheritance remained separate. Income earned during the marriage would be split 60-40 in his favor because he contributed more. Each retained their own retirement accounts. Houses belonged solely to whoever's name was on the deed. I read every line, and I signed without hesitation. He seemed relieved again, unaware of what had changed inside me. Because what he still did not know, what I had not spoken aloud to anyone, was that my uncle, my favorite person in the world, had died 3 weeks earlier. I was still grieving quietly, and the will was in probate. I was set to inherit something, but I did not know the full details then, only that it was likely substantial. He had been like a second father to me, having built a successful medical device company years ago. I had not told Lucas because I had not told anyone. I wanted time, space to process the grief before turning it into numbers, before letting anyone reshape the meaning of it. But Lucas had made something clear: he was not marrying love alone. He was marrying a financial equation. 2 weeks before the wedding, probate finalized. My lawyer broke the news gently. The inheritance amounted to just over $4 million. I sat with it quietly, breathing in the reality. $4 million. A life-changing amount, yet all I felt was a mix of gratitude and heartbreak. I missed my uncle terribly, and wealth did not soften that ache. Lucas knew none of this, and I was in no hurry to tell him. The prenup made it irrelevant anyway. Lucas believed he had secured financial protection for his future. He had no idea how drastically the scales had shifted, or how much his own assumptions had shaped what came next. The morning of our wedding, sunlight filtered through the hotel curtains in soft golden sheets. It should have felt like the beginning of something beautiful, something deeply rooted in love and trust. But beneath the calm surface, there was a quiet tension inside me, like a string stretched too tightly, humming with truths, waiting for the right moment to be spoken. 2 weeks earlier, I had learned the full amount of my inheritance. $4 million, give or take, depending on liquidations and taxes. My uncle had left everything to me. His savings, his investments, even his house, which my lawyer sold immediately. It still felt unreal, not because of the money, but because it came wrapped in loss. Whenever I thought about it, the first thing that came to my mind was not comfort or excitement, but the memory of his laugh, the warmth of his presence, and the ache of knowing he would never hear about my wedding. Lucas did not know any of this, and I had not felt rushed to tell him. There was no malice in my silence. I simply needed space to grieve. And more importantly, he had made it clear with the prenup that he wanted financial boundaries. So I respected that. The ceremony itself was modest but lovely. About 60 people gathered in a small garden behind a hotel ballroom. Lucas insisted on splitting all the costs 50-50, even though he made much more than I did. I paid my half using the savings I had put aside over years of careful budgeting. He paid his with ease. I remember thinking as I watched him straighten his tie that maybe this was simply how he loved, through rigid fairness rather than emotional generosity. The reception was warm and lively, full of well wishes, toasts, laughter, and clinking glasses. But Lucas's spirit carried a certain restlessness, like he was already thinking about the next task, the next financial decision, the next step in planning our future. Even during our first dance, he leaned close and whispered, "Once the wedding gifts roll in, we can start seriously looking at houses. I have numbers ready. I think we can pull off something in the 400 range if we stay disciplined." It was not exactly romantic, but it was very Lucas. Later that night in the hotel suite reserved for us, he changed out of his suit, loosened his collar, and immediately reached for the stack of envelopes from the gift table. I watched him sit cross-legged on the bed, tearing each card open, counting the money with the precision of an accountant. When he finished, he exhaled with satisfaction. $8,400, he announced. "That is great. We can use this for the down payment. I have a spreadsheet ready. If we combine this with our current savings and your teacher income..." I sat at the foot of the bed. "Actually, Lucas, we might not need to be that cautious." He paused mid-sentence. "What do you mean?" I folded my hands in my lap, feeling strangely calm. My uncle, the one who passed a few months ago, I inherited something from him. Lucas set the stack of cards down. His brows drew together as he tried to read my expression. "Okay. How much?" "About $4 million. It was as if time stalled between us. His face shifted in slow, unmistakable stages, first confusion, then shock, then the dawning realization that the prenup he had insisted on suddenly meant something different. $4 million, he repeated, voice stiff. $4 million? Yes. You inherited $4 million 2 weeks ago. Yes. And you did not tell me. Lucas, I needed time. I was still processing his death. And the prenup, he muttered, almost spitting the word. The prenup says inheritance stays separate. Yes, it does. His shock turned sharp. You let me think you had nothing. You let me walk into this marriage believing I was the one bringing the assets. This is deceptive. I never lied to you, I said softly. You did not ask if I was expecting anything, and you wanted a prenup to protect your assets. I respected that by protecting mine too. Lucas stood abruptly pacing the room like a caged animal. You manipulated me. I signed exactly what you asked me to sign. That is not the point. His voice rose. The point is, you knew this. You knew you were inheriting something big, and you hid it so you could trap me under an unfair prenup. I stared at him, absorbing the words with a quiet resignation. Lucas, the prenup, says all inheritance is separate. That would have been true whether it was $5 or $4 million. He stopped pacing and glared at me. Give me your copy. I want to look at it. I pointed to the folder on the nightstand. It is right there. He snatched it up, flipped through the pages, then abruptly stormed toward the bathroom. A moment later, I heard the sound of a lighter flicking, followed by the acrid smell of burning paper. I stood in the doorway. He was holding the prenup over the sink, a small flame devouring the corner. There, he said, voice shaking with triumph and anger. It is gone. I let him finish burning the paper. When the flame died, he looked at me as if waiting for panic. I took out my phone and dialed my lawyer. Hi, I said calmly when he answered. Quick question. You still have the certified copy of the prenup filed with the court, right? Of course, he replied. Why? My husband just burned his copy. I put the call on speaker. My lawyer chuckled lightly. Burning a personal copy does not invalidate anything. The filed version is the only one that matters. Tell him nice try, though. I ended the call. Lucas stared at me pale and furious. You planned this. I planned to follow the prenup you demanded. Do not twist this. You knew exactly what you were doing. You wanted me to sign something that protected your money from me. You wanted a prenup that protected your money from me, I replied evenly. It seems fair that it works both ways. He clenched his jaw, grabbed his jacket, and marched toward the door. I am leaving. We were supposed to stay here 3 days, I reminded him quietly. Enjoy the suite, he muttered, slamming the door behind him. I stood alone in the stillness of the room, listening to the echo fade. The honeymoon had lasted less than an hour. Lucas did not come home for 2 days after leaving the hotel suite. I spent that time in our apartment alone, sitting with the strange collision of emotions swirling inside me. Grief for my uncle, disappointment in Lucas, and an odd, quiet clarity I had never felt before. It was as if the ground beneath everything I thought our relationship was had shifted, revealing a truth I had been too hopeful, too trusting, too in love to see clearly. On the third morning, I found a message waiting on my phone from Lucas. We need to talk. No apology, no question of how I was. Just an agenda. When he finally came home that evening, he did not bring flowers, or remorse, or even humility. He walked in with icy determination, as though he had already decided the narrative he would commit to and defend at all costs. He sat across from me at the kitchen table. I spoke to my lawyer, he said flatly. We are going to challenge the prenup. I didn't flinch. On what grounds? Fraud, concealment, bad faith. He listed them like charges in a criminal case. My lawyer says we have a strong chance. You hid material financial information. I didn't know the exact inheritance amount when we signed, I reminded him. Probate wasn't even finished. But you knew you were inheriting something, and you didn't disclose it. You didn't ask, and you demanded a prenup that explicitly keeps inheritance separate. That was your rule, Lucas. He leaned forward. Do you want to fix this or not? I studied him. His eyes weren't soft. They weren't searching for reconciliation. They were evaluating me like an opponent. What does fix this mean to you? I asked. We redo the prenup, he said. We add what you inherited. We create a new agreement that reflects the full picture. I think that is fair. Fair, a word he used often, but only when it benefited him. And if I don't agree, I ask calmly. He hesitated, then said the words as if they were a weapon. Then we should talk about divorce. I didn't look away. Okay. His face contorted, not in anger, but in shock. He wasn't expecting me to call. His bluff wasn't prepared for the possibility that I wasn't afraid of losing him. You're not even going to fight for us, he demanded. You just threatened divorce as leverage, I replied. I assumed you meant it. He stood abruptly, pacing, hands in his hair. You're being unreasonable. I am following the contract you insisted on, I said. That is the definition of reasonable. That night, he left again. Not for the hotel suite this time, but for his best friend's apartment. He stayed there, refusing to speak to me directly, except through clipped text messages about lawyers and paperwork. On Monday morning, his lawyer called mine. The conversation, according to my attorney, was a spectacular display of desperation. They're claiming you tricked him, my lawyer said, sounding almost amused. They're demanding the prenup be voided. We're going to push back hard. How confident are you? I asked. Confident enough that I already drafted the counter-arguments. Your fiancé, sorry your husband left quite the paper trail. I sat quietly feeling the weight of the word husband, realizing how quickly marriage had become a battleground instead of a partnership. Over the next week, Lucas escalated. His best friend Olivia Bennett called me on his behalf. The moment I answered, she said, Mary, what did you do to him? What did I do? He's devastated, she claimed. He said you hid millions from him. Olivia, he insisted on a prenup to protect his assets because he assumed I had none, I said evenly. I followed the rules he demanded. That sounds vindictive, she snapped. That sounds legally consistent. She let out a frustrated sigh. You need to talk to him. He's hurting. He's hurting because he lost control of the financial narrative, not because he lost me. Olivia hung up without saying goodbye. Then his mother called. The moment I answered, she launched in. You need to make this right, Mary. Hello to you too, I said, maintaining a politeness she didn't deserve. Do not be sarcastic with me. My son is telling everyone what happened. People think you tricked him into signing an unfair prenup. He asked for the prenup, I reminded her. You hid money. The prenup says inheritance stays separate no matter what, whether it's $10 or $4 million. He agreed to that. She paused, then lowered her voice. People are saying you married him under false pretenses. I remained calm. He married me, knowing I was a teacher, making $58,000 a year. That is still true. The existence of an inheritance doesn't change my job. You're going to ruin his reputation, she pressed. I took a breath. He's ruining his own by filing frivolous motions. She hung up abruptly. By the time the first hearing arrived, I had heard enough accusations, ultimatums, and half-truths to numb any remaining shock I might have felt. The courtroom was cold, fluorescent, and sterile, yet the tension inside it felt suffocating. Lucas sat with his lawyer beside him, jaw clenched, posture stiff. I sat with my hands folded, determined to remain composed no matter what unfolded. Lucas's lawyer stood first. Your Honor. My client was manipulated into signing a prenup he did not fully understand. Important financial information was deliberately concealed. The judge turned to me. Did you conceal anything? He asked directly. I answered honestly. I did not know the final inheritance amount at the time, and the prenup specifically states that all inheritance remains separate. Lucas's lawyer tried again, but she knew something was coming. She misled him into signing. My lawyer rose. Your Honor, Exhibit A. He handed over printed emails, ones I had seen before, but seeing them in a legal setting felt strangely vindicating. They were from Lucas to his advisor, weeks before the prenup conversation, discussing how to protect his assets because Mary doesn't make much. Text messages were next. Then notes from Lucas's advisor clearly documenting the intent to safeguard Lucas's future earnings from potential claims. The judge read silently for a moment. Then he turned to Lucas. Did you read the prenup before signing? Lucas hesitated. Yes. Did you have legal representation? Yes. Did your lawyer explain that inheritance remains separate property? Yes, but did you understand that inheritance might occur for either party? I assumed it would not be significant, he muttered. So you made an assumption, the judge said plainly. Assumptions do not invalidate a contract. Motion to void the prenup is denied. The words struck the air like a hammer. Lucas's lawyer tried to protest, but the judge raised a hand. The document is valid. We move forward under its terms. The hearing ended with that. Outside the courtroom, Lucas approached me, fury simmering beneath a fragile calm. This is insane, he said. We've been married for a month. You're really doing this. You filed for divorce, I reminded him. Not me. You could fix it, he insisted. You could sit down with me, redo the agreement, meet me halfway. I already did, I replied. When I signed the prenup, you demanded. His expression sharpened. You're going to regret this. I met his gaze steadily. No, I regret marrying someone who saw me as a financial liability. He stepped back as if struck. As Lucas walked away, I felt something final settle in my chest. Not triumph, not bitterness, but a quiet, resolute acceptance. The divorce war had only begun, but so had the unraveling of the man I thought I knew. If someone had told me that my marriage would become a legal battleground less than 3 months after saying our vows, I would have assumed it was a cruel joke. But there I was, living through it in real time, a tangle of motions, hearings, accusations, and emotional whiplash, led by a man who once claimed to love me. Lucas was not fighting to save our marriage. He was fighting to reclaim a financial narrative he believed he had lost control of. His pride, not his heart, was on trial. After the prenup survived the first attempt to invalidate it, Lucas shifted strategies. His lawyer filed a new motion claiming I owed Lucas emotional damages, arguing that my non-disclosure of the inheritance had caused him significant psychological distress. My own lawyer had laughed when he told me. "This is frivolous," he said with confidence. "A court won't entertain this for more than a minute." He was right. The judge dismissed the claim almost immediately, barely allowing Lucas's lawyer to finish his statement before ruling it out. But Lucas didn't stop. Every failed attempt only fueled him further, as if he needed the fight itself to justify his indignation. At home, the atmosphere was icy and tense. Lucas visited occasionally to gather clothes or documents, always accompanied by a new accusation or demand. One evening, he stood in the living room, arms crossed, and announced that he wanted half of the wedding gifts. "The prenup states that gifts received during marriage are separate unless given jointly," I reminded him. "These were wedding gifts," he argued. "They were for us." "We can split the jointly given ones," I said. "But gifts from my friends and family remain mine. Yours remain yours." His jaw tightened. "Fine. Then we should itemize everything." And so we did. My lawyer arranged the list, and to Lucas's dismay, the combined value of gifts from my side was higher. He grumbled that it was unfair that my family had intentionally given more to spite him, as if wedding guests had foreseen this bizarre petty war. Every step in this unraveling revealed more of who Lucas truly was. He was not merely upset. He was outraged that he had not secured a financial advantage, outraged that he could not reverse the prenup, outraged that I refused to bend to his shifting demands. It became clear that he had never expected partnership, only compliance. But the moment that defined the heart of his intentions came unexpectedly during a phone call from his mother. She called me one afternoon while I was preparing lesson plans. Her voice carried indignation even before she spoke the first full sentence. "You are destroying my son's life, Mary," she said. "This is not who he married." I took a steady breath. "What did he tell you this time?" "That you tricked him, that you hid money, that you married him knowing he made more, and then used your inheritance to blindside him. People are talking. They think..." And then she said it. The sentence that cracked open her son's true motivations more clearly than anything else had. "People think he never would have married you if he knew you had money." I stopped writing mid-sentence. "Say that again." There was a pause, the kind where someone realizes too late that they have revealed more than intended. "I meant well. He would have approached things differently." "No," I said slowly, letting the words settle in my chest. "You meant he married me because he believed I had nothing." "That's not..." "Thank you," I said quietly, "for the honesty." She hung up immediately. It was strange how freeing that moment felt. Painful, yes, but freeing. In that instant, every action Lucas took suddenly made perfect sense: the prenup, the arguments, the accusations, the rage. When he discovered the inheritance, he had not chosen me for who I was. He had chosen me for who he thought I wasn't. The final divorce hearing arrived in the 10th week of our marriage. I arrived wearing a simple navy dress, hair pulled back, heart steady. Lucas arrived looking polished but physically tense. His lawyer carried a stack of folders as though quantity could replace quality. The judge entered and called the room to order. "We are here today to finalize the divorce under the prenuptial agreement." Lucas's lawyer stood launching into a dramatic plea. "Your Honor, enforcing this prenup will result in an unconscionable outcome. My client will leave this marriage with less than he came in with." The judge raised an eyebrow. "How is that possible?" "Legal fees, Your Honor." He spent $18,000 defending himself. The judge looked unimpressed. Self-inflicted costs from frivolous motions do not override a valid contractual agreement. "Anything else?" Lucas's lawyer tried again. "Yes. Given the timing of the inheritance, my client deserves a portion of those funds. It was obtained just before the marriage." The judge leaned forward. "The inheritance occurred before the wedding. The prenup explicitly isolates inheritance as separate property. She keeps it. Period." He turned his gaze to Lucas. "Sir, you signed a legal contract. You had representation. You understood its terms. The court will not rewrite an agreement because you dislike the outcome." My lawyer remained silent, letting the judge's clarity speak for us. After a beat, the judge said divorce granted. And just like that, my marriage of 11 weeks was over. Lucas stood abruptly. "This isn't over," he said loud enough to echo loud enough for the courtroom clerk to glance up. The judge looked sharply at him. "Yes, it is. You're divorced. Stop contacting her or I will issue a restraining order." Lucas's face flushed with fury. His mother put a hand on his arm, but he shook it off and walked out. Jaw-locked, shoulders rigid, utterly unwilling to accept a reality he created himself. I walked out moments later, stepping into the corridor with a quiet sense of closure. Not triumph, not bitterness, just relief. Clean, steady relief. Out of all the betrayals, ultimatums, and legal maneuvers that had consumed the past weeks, the clearest truth was this: the marriage never failed. It never really existed in the way I thought it had. Lucas loved control. He loved security. He loved the idea of building a life with someone who depended on him financially. But he did not love me not the way a partner should. And as I walked out of that courthouse, I realized something I'd been too hurt to name before. My inheritance didn't ruin my marriage. It revealed it. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, life felt strangely quiet in the best possible way. There were no more urgent calls from my lawyer, no motions arriving in the mail, no frantic accusations from Lucas or panicked speeches from his mother. My phone had stopped vibrating with demands, threats, or guilt-laced messages. The silence was not empty. It was peaceful, healing, clarifying. I had returned fully to my routine at the high school where I taught history. Teenagers still complained about essay deadlines, still asked why they needed to memorize dates, still rolled their eyes at lectures about the Cold War. But I found renewed comfort in the predictable rhythm of my classroom. There was something grounding about standing in front of students who didn't care about my financial status, inheritance, or personal life. They cared only about whether they had homework and if they could have an extra day to turn it in. My inheritance remained untouched, except for what my financial advisor recommended: safe investments, diversified accounts, and a trust that would grow quietly in the background of my everyday life. That was something I hadn't expected, that I could still live the same life I'd lived before, just with more stability beneath it. I still wore the same clothes, drove the same modest car, and lived with the same habits I'd built over years of budgeting and being careful. It almost surprised me how little desire I had to change anything. The money didn't tempt me the way Lucas seemed convinced it would. Instead, it reminded me of my uncle and the values he had instilled in me: humility, independence, generosity, and wisdom. He would have wanted the money to support a meaningful life, not a lavish one. One of the first things I did after the divorce settled was start a financial literacy program at the school. I pitched it to the principal as a series of after-school workshops on budgeting, investments, savings, and long-term planning. Teenagers, I told him, were entering adulthood with no clue about money, a pitfall that could ruin them before they even got started. He approved it immediately. Maybe he could sense the personal history beneath my proposal, or maybe he simply believed in the idea. Either way, the program became one of the most fulfilling things I'd done in years. Teaching kids how to avoid the kinds of assumptions and missteps Lucas had made, and the ones I had allowed myself to overlook, felt like closure. Lucas, however, was still trapped in his own spiral. I learned from mutual acquaintances, not by seeking updates, but because people in overlapping social circles talk, that Lucas had tried to reach out indirectly. He didn't contact me directly, but he contacted my friends, his friends, and even coworkers who barely knew me. He would tell them he wanted closure, though. What he really wanted was a second chance, or perhaps more accurately, a renegotiation of the financial terms of the life he had let burn to the ground. I blocked every attempt and asked those around me not to pass along messages. Most respected that without question. A few hesitated, usually the ones who thought reconciliation was noble or that forgiveness required communication. But forgiveness, I learned, doesn't need proximity. It just needs acceptance. Still, some people insisted on inserting themselves. Olivia Bennett. His best friend texted me a month after the divorce. Her message was short. "He really regrets what happened. You should talk to him." I didn't respond immediately. I wanted to think carefully before replying. Eventually, I wrote back. "The divorce gave us closure. There is nothing left to discuss." She responded in minutes. "You're just going to throw away what you had." I stared at the text for a long moment, then replied, "He threw it away when he filed for divorce over money. I'm just choosing not to pick it back up." I never heard from her again. Eventually, I learned why. Olivia had become uncomfortable defending Lucas once the full story leaked out, once people realized he had demanded a prenup to protect his supposedly superior assets, only to turn furious when he discovered I had more than he did. The irony of that dynamic did not play well with most people. What did spread slowly but steadily was the truth. People began to question his narrative. Friends who had initially believed him started pulling back. Some even apologized to me, saying they didn't know the whole story. I didn't need their apologies. Their distance from Lucas was apology enough. But the most surprising twist came from Lucas's new relationship. A colleague approached me in the parking lot after school one afternoon and said, "Have you heard who Lucas is seeing now?" I told her no. I didn't follow his life, didn't check his social media, didn't discuss him with mutual friends. "It's his financial advisor," she said, lowering her voice, "the one who told him to push for the prenup." At first I said nothing. Then quietly I said, "That actually makes sense." "It gets better," she added almost reluctantly. She was still married when they started seeing each other. I felt a strange mixture of sadness and clarity. Not joy, never joy, but a recognition of a pattern I should have seen long ago. Lucas wanted someone who lived in his world of strategy, ambition, and self-preservation. Someone who valued financial leverage as much as he did. Someone who navigated relationships like business deals. But life has a way of balancing people. Her husband discovered the affair. Their divorce turned ugly fast. According to what was now being whispered through mutual acquaintances, he was taking her for everything. The irony again was heavy. Lucas had tried so hard to protect himself from imagined threats that he had created a real one, a messy relationship with someone who was losing far more financially than he had ever gained. I stayed quiet. I didn't comment. I didn't revel. I didn't gloat. I simply stepped further away from a life that no longer included him. In the calm of my house, one I had purchased outright, a modest 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood, I felt the kind of peace people chase for years. I paid cash for the property not because I wanted to show anything, but because my financial advisor insisted it was the most stable choice long term. I still drove my old car, still clipped coupons out of habit, still taught history to teenagers who barely appreciated the topic. And yet everything felt different. One evening, while grading papers at my kitchen table, I realized something profound. I had stopped thinking about Lucas entirely. Not out of bitterness, not out of anger, but because he had simply become irrelevant to the person I was becoming. His shadow no longer stretched over my choices. His voice no longer echoed in my thoughts. His demands, arguments, and accusations no longer shaped how I saw myself. He had become a lesson, a long, painful, but ultimately liberating lesson, and I was finally free from it. People sometimes ask if I regret not telling him about the inheritance earlier, or if I regret tricking him as he had accused. My answer is always the same. No, I don't regret protecting myself when he forced my hand. I regret choosing someone who valued money over partnership. I regret ignoring the warning signs because I wanted love to win out. I regret giving 4 years to someone who saw my career as not lucrative. I regret trusting a man who wanted control more than companionship. But protecting myself, no. I will never regret that. My uncle used to say, "Marry someone who would stay with you even if you were broke." I used to think that meant seek humility in others. Now I know the deeper truth. I married someone who only loved me when he thought I was broke. And when he learned I wasn't, he hated me for it. That isn't love. That's opportunism. The irony is that the prenup Lucas demanded his greatest strategy became